Welcome to step 3 of my tutorial for learning GameMaker in 3 steps. It's the final step. In this step, we're going to learn about implementing collisions, which is one way to keep objects from moving through other objects. We're going to add a title screen, and we're going to learn how to actually publish your game to the web. Right now, this is where we are thus far in the project. We have keyboard controls for this object. We can move around the screen to play our notes as they disappear. And we have a score system, as you can see in the top of the screen there. Just working very nicely. And let's get right into it. So let me close this. Let's learn about collisions. So collisions in game making or game design is when an object interacts with another object, usually to stop the object from moving. So imagine the game Tetris, right? In Tetris, a block moves down, and then what keeps it from moving further down is a collision. What keeps it from moving off the left of the game screen is a collision. In this game, we want our keyboard, or our piano keyboard, to not be able to leave the boundaries of our game. So to do that, we're going to create a new sprite. We will call it lowercase s, capital B for border, S border. Canvas size is 64 by 64, which we don't have to change it. It's already that. We're going to set its origin to be top left, which is already what it's set at, top left. And we are going to click Edit Image. Let's select a bright color. I'm going to select yellow. Except I'm going to change its alpha to be way more transparent. The way we're going to do that is I'm going to actually right-click. Over here? There we go. That's how we change the color. So I'm going to go over here to this yellow color box right here. I'm going to double-click it where we can edit the color a bit. And under alpha, I'm going to make it semi-transparent. I'm going to make it like this, so I can still see through it. I'm going to set it to like 60, 70, or like 90. Click OK. I'm going to click the fill tool, and I'm going to fill it in. So this is going to be a semi-transparent block. And this is going to be helpful when adding it to our room, so we can still see things behind it and in front of it very easily. But we'll still know where it is. But when we play the game, we won't see it because we're going to change something so it becomes invisible when we play the game. So we exit out of the sprite editor window. We have it all set, this semi-transparent block. And we're going to create a new object and call it O border. Assigned the correct sprite. And then open our game. Hold on. Yeah. Open our game, and we're going to select the instances layer. And we're going to change the grid so that it's not 30 by 32. We're going to change it to be 64 by 64, which is the same dimensions as our border object. So we're going to click the little arrow right up here, and you can see it's already set to 64 by 64, so we don't actually have to change anything. But the grid color is white, which you can't really see. I'm going to select black. I'm going to increase the visibility of the black grid so it's much more easy to see. If you were to change this, it's very easy to. For instance, if you select top layer, you'll see that the grid is set to 32 by 32. You could change that to 64 by 64 if you wanted. And what this does is that it allows us to very easily place objects on that grid. So I'm back to the instances layer. Our grid is properly set. And I'm going to select our border object here. I'm just going to have it clicked on, highlighted. Now, assuming that you have laptop mode turned off, which is a little button up here. If you're on a laptop, click that to make sure that's off. And if you're using a 3-button mouse, you can hold the left Alt key on your keyboard, and you'll see that our object is following our mouse now. And we can now paint with this object along this grid. If you turn off the grid, it no longer snaps to the grid, and it just follows our mouse wherever. If we turn on the grid, it only snaps to those grid locations. So I'm going to cover all of the borders. I'm going to zoom out a little bit by holding Control and using the scroll wheel, and then move this around by clicking with the scroll wheel. Get it there. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I'm going to cover our borders with our border object. We're going to exit out of there, and in O border, we're going to go here where it says visible and it's automatically checked on. We're going to click that to uncheck visible so that when our game runs, we won't be able to see it. If you open our game, you still see the yellow border objects. But if we run our game, which we will do right now, you'll see that we don't see them anymore. Now, they don't do anything to stop our piano from leaving the room yet because we haven't added any code, but we don't see it, but it's visibly, it is where we need it to be. So now we can write our collision code to keep our piano object in the room. So open O keyboard, open the step event, and this is where we're going to be adding the code. So immediately before we commit to changing its X and Y locations, I'm going to put my cursor there and add a bunch of new lines. So this is where we're going to be adding our collision code immediately before this. And the location matters a lot because we need to do this calculation right before we change the object's location. New comment, horizontal collision. And here's our code. If, open parentheses, place meeting, open parentheses, X plus HSP, comma, Y, comma, O border, close parentheses, open curly brackets, close curly brackets. So what is this doing? So we have our HSP all calculated here for its movement. What we're doing is we're saying, hey, check if wherever our piano object is going to be. So artificially add or hypothetically add this number, HSP, to our X location. This is not when we've moved it. We haven't done any moving yet. This is just a hypothetical. Look at our location if we add this number to our X position and check to see if we would overlap with our border object. And if we're overlapping with our border object, run the following code. I'm going to indent, create a temporary variable called 1pixel equals sign HSP. What this function does, sign, is that it checks to see if it's a positive or a negative number. If it's a positive number, this just returns the number 1. If it's a negative number, it just returns a negative number. We could also do sign for hmove, but this is just a little simpler. So even if this is like, if HSP is like -7 or -5, this will just change it to -1. If it's like -5 or +5, this will just return +1. So this will give us the 1 pixel that we need to move the piano object in the next line. While, so this is new and I'll explain it in a bit. So while, open parentheses, exclamation point or bang, place meeting. So what we're saying is, hey, if we are not currently overlapping, do something in a moment. So we're going to write a bang place meeting X plus 1 pixel, comma Y, comma O border, close parentheses, close parentheses. So a while condition. What this does is that it's going to run any code that we place within it all in one frame. And it's going to keep repeating this code as long as this is true. And it won't stop repeating that code or calculation until this is false. So what this does is that, hey, it checks, hey, in 1 pixel in the direction we're intending to go, are we overlapping O border? If not, if we're not overlapping, please do the following. I'm going to open a curly bracket, and while I can add a curly bracket down here, I'm going to make it all in one line because that works the same way in GameMaker. Open and close curly bracket. I'm going to write X plus equals 1 pixel. So what this does is says, it checks, hey, if hypothetically in 1 more pixel, are we overlapping the border? No, then move 1 pixel. Next pixel, are we overlapping? No, then add that 1 pixel. And then finally, when we're finally overlapping the border object in 1 pixel, if we move 1 more pixel, would it be overlapping? True, then exit this while statement. That's what happens. It just leaves it. It stops making that calculation. Then after that, we write HSP equals 0, meaning we're going to stop. And I find that this is kind of hard to explain with just code, so I'm actually going to open our game room. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to turn off the grid, select the instance layer so I can move around this keyboard. So what's happening here? So this blue border is the border of our object, and we see our a border object here. Now, this keyboard, if I remember correctly, is moving 7 pixels every frame. So what's happening every frame is actually jumping 7 pixels, 7 pixels, 7 pixels, 7 pixels. So it's every frame, 7 pixels, 7 pixels, 7 pixels, 7 pixels, 7 pixels. And it might be only 3 pixels away when it's about to jump another 7 pixels. And that'd be completely overlapping. So what this does is that the code checks, hey, in 7 pixels, would we be overlapping? Oh, if in 7 pixels we would be overlapping, then we need to run some code so we don't overlap. And instead, we run a while statement that says, hey, in the next pixel, will we overlap? No, then move 1 pixel. In the next pixel, will we overlap? No, move a pixel. Next pixel, will we overlap? No. And it just keeps moving 1 pixel at a time, 1 pixel at a time, 1 pixel at a time, until it lands perfectly flush. And then it asks, hey, is the next pixel, will we be overlapping? Yes. Then exit that while statement and stop our horizontal movement. And one thing to note with while statements is that this isn't happening in consecutive frames. This is all happening in 1 frame of the game. So this is a calculation. It'll calculate how many more pixels do we need to move to get flush with the border, and then it'll snap us to the border. And then it'll stop its horizontal movement. So I'm going to run the game, and I'm going to show you that it works. We no longer overlap, and we just stop perfectly at where the border is. And in fact, if I go to our border object and make it so it's visible, so you can see it's stopping exactly where it needs to be. No accidental overlapping at all. Now, this is a collision system that I didn't invent. A lot of people have been using this collision system written in slightly different ways for many years. It's a very common thing. This is my version of it that makes it sort of use the fewest number of lines. Now we need to do the same thing for vertical collision. This is just for horizontal collision. So we're just going to add a new line and write vertical collision. And we can actually copy and paste this and change a bunch of things, but I find that when students or other people do that, they end up forgetting to change something. So it makes me a little hesitant to copy and paste. I know I can, and I know everything to change, but instead I'm just going to write it all out again. So if place meeting x, comma, y plus VSP, comma, O border, close parentheses, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, indent, var 1 pixel equals sign VSP, close parentheses, semicolon, return new line, while bang place meeting, so while not overlapping, open parentheses, x, comma, y plus 1 pixel, comma, O border, close parentheses, open curly bracket, space, y plus equals 1 pixel. Actually, I'm going to add a little semicolon there up on both of these. Close curly bracket, enter, VSP equals 0. Semicolon. This is doing the exact same thing except with its vertical collision calculation. And you'll notice if I didn't have any typos, it should work to stop our keyboard from leaving the screen top and bottom. So we can still try to leave, but it'll stop perfectly from leaving the screen. And that's a collision system. And that's a collision system you can use in role-playing games, top-down games, shooting games, platforming games. This is a collision system you can use in a bunch of different games. And just one thing to remember is always put this collision code right before you commit to your horizontal and vertical movement. Now let's add some visual polish to our game screen just to make it look a little prettier. Right now it's still a little bare bones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bunch of sprite assets here. I'm going to add a new sprite. Call this one S staff. and I'm going to import the right thing. It is under Visual Polish folder. This is staff.png, all right. And the origin should be top left, I believe. And it's already 64 by 64, so yeah. Now I just need to do this and add a bunch more. So I'm actually going to duplicate Control D or Command D. It's going to duplicate this a bunch because a lot of these will have the name sstaff in them, even though they're going to be different names. Duplicate, enter. Oh, Control D, enter. Control D, enter. Control D, enter. Let's change this one. I'm going to just hit F2 to rename it. sstaff. Call this one sstaff base, BASS. Call the other one sstaff base end. Enter. Call this one sstaff border left. Enter. Sstaff border right. Enter. I need two more, so I'm going to duplicate this 2 more times. Rename this sstaff treble and sstaff treble end. There we go. And now we need to go in here and import all the correct images. So this is sstaff base, sstaff base, sstaff base end. This is sstaff border left. This is sstaff border right. F-staff treble. This is staff treble end. I have all the correct things imported now. Now we're going to open our game and we're going to add a new layer. It's going to be an asset layer, which is here, the little plus sign. Click create new asset layer. And this allows us to add sprites directly into our room as decoration. They don't have to be objects because they're not running any code. They're just going to be decoration in our game room. Right now it's called assets_1. I'm going to change it just to be called something better, like call it decoration. And we're going to make sure that the grid for this layer is 64 by 64. So I'm going to go here and change it to 64 by 64. I'm going to change the grid color to black, and I'm going to increase the visibility of the grid dramatically so I can see more of it. Also, my piano object is way to the right, so I'm going to hit instances layer and just move it back to where it belongs. Back to decoration layer. And we're going to decorate our game so that the staffs are covered by the border objects and the left and right staff borders are not. So let's start decorating. I'll show you exactly what you need to do. So let's start with the treble clef. Oh. Now, if I remember correctly, in the actual game I have designed, let me open it up here. I just want to remember how it's supposed to look. In the end game, yeah, it's supposed to be like that. Okay. There we go. So I'm going to get my treble. I'm going to have it here, and I'm just going to hold Alt like I can paint with it. I'm going to put it right here. And I'm going to have sstaff follow it, and I'm just going to paint with sstaff. Is that correct? I believe it is. And then staff treble end. And then I'm going to have staff border left. I think it goes all the way down. Oh, actually, it doesn't go all the way down because we need our treble clef. It's all the way down there. And then staff border right. And then staff base, I can put at the very bottom here. And then back to sstaff. And then S base end. I think that is correct. Now, it means I need to take my border objects here and move them down a bit. So I'm actually going to hold down the shift key and click and drag, and I can select all of these to delete. I'm going to hit O border, hit Alt, and then just repaint them right here. And I think I'm going to select top layer. I'm going to move our O score object. I guess it doesn't matter where that's located because it gets fixed in its code. So that doesn't matter. Back to the decoration layer. I think that is correct. And we can run the game and see how it looks. Yep. And now the music is the music staffs are now keeping, or they appear to be keeping, our keyboard in the room when it's actually our border object. Beautiful. We're actually going to add a little more visual panache or polish to our score object. We're going to create a new sprite, call it S score. We're going to import the correct image, which is again in the visual polish folder. It's called score.png. And set its origin not to be top left, but middle right. That puts it right over here. And in our OScore object, in the draw event, instead of assigning that sprite to be the sprite for this object, we're just going to draw the sprite in the draw event. Right, draw underscore sprite, open parentheses, S score, comma, which subimage? There's only one subimage, 0, so subimage 0. And then we'd like to place it at the X and Y location of the object itself. This is just a useful sprite. We could have done it where we have the sprite object over here, but then I need to teach you some other things because when you have a draw event, it overwrites whatever you have for its sprite. So it's much easier just to do this. And we can run the game and see how it looks. So now we have this little note equals 0. Beautiful. Let's add a title screen. We're going to open our title here. We're going to click the background layer and we're going to add a sprite, that same S background sprite that we use in the game. And in the room properties, in its creation code, so you see the room properties have disappeared here. So to get them back, you just click the tab up here. Under room properties or room settings, we click the creation code and we're going to delete this line where it says room go to game because we're actually going to have a button do that for us. And we're going to create some new sprites that we're going to be using in our title screen. So create the following sprites and assign their correct images. The first sprite we're going to create is called S title. Import, let's see, it's going to be under, I think it's going to be under publishing, no? Title screen. Title screen is the folder. And this is going to be title.png. And we're always going to do middle center origin for all of these. So middle center there, then create a new sprite. Call this one S start button. Import start button, middle center origin. Create sprite. Call this S credits 1. Import credits 1, middle center. Create sprite. Call this S credits 2. Import credits 2, middle center origin. And now in the title room, we're going to create a new assets layer, this little plus sign. Again, I'm going to rename it because I don't like this name. I'm just going to call it decoration again. Doesn't matter what you call it, honestly. Doesn't matter at all for our purposes. And we're going to move all of our new sprites onto the title screen. So let's start with S title. I'm going to drag that in. put it near the top. And that's about right. So if I change the grid color to black so we can see it a little better, that's about 2 blocks space on the left, 2 blocks space on the right. So it's pretty much centered. So we're good there. We need to add, I guess we're not adding the start button because we need to create an object for that. So let's add the credits now. So S credits 1. We're going to put it like right there, and then S credits 2. Actually need to put this a little higher. Is that centered? No, it's not centered. Yeah, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, that's centered now. So this is our title screen, but we need a start button. We can run the game, see how it looks, but it won't go to our game anymore because we don't have a way to go to the game. But this is our title screen. Nice and pretty. We have the credits here, a game by Dr. Skylar L. Anderson, PhD. Wanted to make it all fancy looking. And now let's create a new object that's going to be our start button object. So create object, call it O, capital S for start, capital B for button, O start button. Add a new, assign the appropriate sprite, which is S start button. And add a step event and write if distance to point mouse underscore x comma mouse underscore y is less than or equals to 0. So this is like what we did when we were hovering over our block objects or our notes initially with when we had mouse controls. Same thing here. Close parentheses, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, indent. Another if condition, if mouse check button pressed, open parentheses. So what this function does is that it checks to see if the mouse button that we're about to write here was recently pressed down. It's not checking if we're holding it down, it checks only for the one frame that it was pressed down. MB underscore any. So here you can write MB left to check the left mouse button or MB right to check the right mouse button. I do MB any, meaning any mouse button click will count. And I like that just for simplicity's sake. Double close parentheses, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, indent, room, go to our game. So this will now work as a start button, but we need to open our title screen and add our start button. I'm going to highlight the instances layer, drag the start button in here, make sure it's centered right there. I think it's centered. Either way, we can add some code here. Add create events. This is what I do to make sure everything's perfectly centered. X equals room width divided by 2. So that will make sure that it's perfectly centered. So now let's run the game. If I click this, it'll take us to the game. Now, to let players know that they can actually click on the start button, we're going to add a small animation to it when we're hovering over the start button. So in O start button in the create event, write scale equals 1. These are all variables we're declaring for some code we're about to write. Scale underscore max equals 1.1. Scale underscore min for minimum equals 1. Grow equals false. And sound underscore played equals false. And we're going to see how these variables are used in our code now in the step event. So in the step event code right here where we're doing this check if we're hovering, I'm going to click over here on this line and add a bunch of lines. Because we're going to write some code here. We're going to write if bang sound played. So if sound played is false. So right now it's declared as false. So it checks to see if it's false, and if it is false, open and close curly brackets, audio, play, sound, SND, note 2, just one of our note sounds, comma, priority of 1, and we do not want it to loop, so set it to false. And then we write sound underscore played equals true. So remember how I was teaching you in the last video about sounds that if this function is running every frame of the game, it will play the sound every frame of the game, even if we set the loop to false, because it'll just continuously implement this function. One way to make it so it plays only once is to do this little on-off switch where we check if a Boolean is set to false. If it is, play the sound and then set it to true, so it only runs this function once. And then after that, we are going to write new line, if scale is less than scale underscore max, close parentheses, and we're not going to write any curly brackets because we're just going to do this as an inline condition. Scale plus equals 0.02. So right here we have the scale set to 1, and and scale max is set to 1.1. So if scale is less than 1, if 1 is less than 1.1, which it is, increase the scale by 0.02. Then we're going to have this code for to get to the game. But we're going to add an else statement at the very end of this if condition for distance to point. At the very last curly bracket, we will write else, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, meaning when we're no longer hovering over the button, we got to make it so the button will shrink again, and we reset whether we can play that hovering sound effect. So we change sound underscore played equals false again. And then if scale is greater than scale underscore min, scale minus equals 0.02. And then at the end of everything, we're going to make it so our sprite images grows and shrinks according to whatever scale is set at. And we're going to use image underscore x scale equals scale, and then image underscore y scale equals scale. Image x scale and image y scale are ways to stretch or shrink sprites in your game in kind of fun ways. So x scale obviously means horizontal stretching, and y scale obviously means vertical stretching. So if we set the scale to 1, image x scale, that's the default, is 1 or 100%. If we set the scale to be 1.1, that is 10% bigger. If we set it to 0.9, it'll be 10% smaller, right? So as we change scale is going, when we're hovering over it, it's going to increase the scale until it's 10% bigger, and then it'll stop growing. And then when we're not hovering it, it will shrink it until it's back down to 1, and whatever scale is, that's what our image x scale and image y scales will be too. Now let's run the game and see if it works. Hover over it, it grows a little bit. It grows very quickly, but it's not snapping. It kind of just has a slight animation to it. It plays that sound effect only once, and then when I stop hovering over it and hover it over it again, it plays it again. Beautiful. So now the player, when they hover over this button, will know that they can click on it and get to the game. Let's open our game room, and in room properties, go to the creation code, and we're going to make it so our mouse cursor doesn't appear anymore, because in our game, we actually don't use the mouse anymore. We need the mouse to click the start button, but then we don't need to see it anymore. So we can actually write window set cursor, open parentheses, CR underscore none, close parentheses, semicolon. So this sets the cursor or the mouse to be invisible while we're playing the game. However, if we ever go back to our title screen, we want to see the mouse again. So open our title, creation code, and write a comment, show mouse, and then write window set cursor, open parentheses, CR underscore default. And default is just whatever image the computer wants the cursor to be, it'll be that. So let's run the game and see if it works. We should be able to see the cursor or the mouse when we're on the title screen, but when we click into the game, our mouse now disappears. But when the note gets back up to the top of the screen, the game's going to restart. We'll get back to the title screen and we'll be able to see our mouse again. Yep. Let's add a high score to the title screen, and we need to move our global variables first. So it's always a good idea to declare global variables before anywhere they could be used. And so the way I do it is that I have a room, an invisible room that the player never interacts with, that appears before even the title screen. And it's only used to declare global variables. And it declares all global variables the player will need, or the game will need to use in the screen, in the game. So let's create a new room. So room create. Where's room? There we are. I'm going to call it R splash. And we're going to set the width to be 896 and the height to be 576, which is, I believe, the same height and width as our other rooms. It has to be that way because the first room that loads up sets the size of the game window. We're going to select this little, or click this little home icon here that's right next to our title. We get this other window and we're going to drag our splash to the very top. So it'll be the first room that loads up. So now you'll see the little home icon next to our splash. And we are going to copy the global variables from our title screen and move it into the creation code of our splash. So let's open our title, go to the creation code. And here we're going to just take all this and we're going to cut them, Control X or Command X, and go to the creation code of our splash, paste them. And we are going to also write global.highscore equals 0. Let's see. And room go to our title. So the game will load up our splash and then it will immediately take us to the title, but it'll declare our global variables first. And we're going to use this high score global variable in code. First, let's run the game and make sure that everything looks okay. Yep, it takes us to the title screen appropriately. That's good. So we're going to create a new object, call it O high score with capital H for high, capital S for score. We're going to copy the draw event from O score. We're just going to open O score to the draw event, and we're just going to take all this and we're going to copy it, Command C or Control C, and we're just going to go to add event and draw, create a new draw event, and we can paste it all there. We're going to change one thing though. Instead of drawing string global.points, we're going to write global.highscore. And then we're going to add a create event. And we're going to write some code so that this object only appears after the game has been played at least once and the high score is above 0. So when the player first opens the game, the no high score will be shown on the title screen. If global.points $=0, remember if we're checking the value of something, we write double equal sign instead of just a single equal sign. Close parentheses, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, indent, instance underscore destroy. So if the player's never gotten a high score, we instantly in the create event destroy this object so the player never sees it. However, we write else, open curly brackets, close curly brackets, and we write global.highscore equals global.points, and then global.points equals 0. So what this does is if the player has played the game and so global.points is above 0, it will not only not destroy the high score object, it will assign whatever points the player got in their last playthrough to the high score variable. So the high score variable is going to store it, and then we reset what the points are back down to 0. And then we also need to reset a couple of other things when the player is replaying the game. Global.block speed equals -1, which is what we have it set initially. And we need to also write x equals room width divided by 2 to make sure the high score appears in the middle of our room. So let's close that and open our title, and we're going to select the instances layer and drag O high score in there. Let's put it like here. It's going to be centered anyway, but vertically that's about where we want it, or down here. Ah, right there is good. And then lastly, go to O block object, and in the outside room event, double click that to open it. Instead of game restart, we're going to change this to simply room go to our title. And this is important for a few reasons. This allows us to have a high score, because otherwise the high score variable is going to be reset every time the game restarts. This will take us back to the title, and our high score object is going to be responsible for resetting whatever global variables need to get reset, and it'll keep the high score. And you'll notice that the music in the background will no longer restart. It will just continue playing from where it was last playing in the game. So let's play the game and see if it works. We don't see any high score here because we haven't played the game yet. Click begin. Let's get a high score. Okay, we got a high score of whatever this is. I'm going to let this note go to the top of the screen. Takes us to title, and now we have a new high score of 8 that appears, and you notice that the music is continuing to play where it last was playing in the game room. We click begin. Game restarts. We have points back down to 0, and let's try to get more than 8 points this time. Now the high score is 10. Next, we want to let players know that that little sign means their high score on the title screen. So let's add some text. So in O high score, close out of this, go to O high score. Let's add some text to it. So in the draw event, add this to the bottom. Draw set H align fa center. Draw text X, so it's wherever the X location is, but Y plus 35, which means place this 35 pixels lower than wherever the object is located, comma, open quote marks. I'm going to make this a little visually appealing. I'm going to add curly brackets there in the string and write high score, close curly brackets, close quote mark. And again, these curly brackets are not meant for code. They're just meant to like make the high score words look fancy, like it's on a sheet of music. Close parentheses, semicolon. Run the game to see how it looks. Again, we won't have a high score when the game starts. So let's just play the game once. Wait for that note to get to the top of the screen. There we go. So 9 high score. Let's see. We have that all left. Center. Something looks weird though, so I'm gonna adjust the code. I think I need to make it a little different. Let's make this note leave the screen again, and I'll see what looks odd to me. Yeah, that. Oh, I know. It's because this is centered right here, and this is where it's centered right here. So if this number gets bigger, it'll look more centered. So where it is totally fine. So it's totally fine. Now, I have a question for you. Have you noticed that the notes that start appearing in the game look a little similar to you? Like it's the exact same notes. So if I start the game, it starts with those notes there. And if I start the game again, those same notes should appear. Look at that, same exact notes. If I run the game again, you'll see the same exact notes appear there. Now, if you remember, we have it set so a function should be randomly selecting numbers for the values of where these notes should appear and which notes should appear. But that's not necessarily how randomness works on computers or in GameMaker. So all random number generation on computers works through a seed, which is a way to generate randomness. If you have the same seed, it's the same type of randomness will appear. So those notes are appearing at random locations, but we have the exact same seed number for random numbers in GameMaker right now. So it'll allow us to repeat the exact same locations and get the exact same random numbers over and over again. Now, the reason GameMaker has the exact same random seed to create the random number is to help troubleshoot problems. If you're developing a game, you want to be able to see where things appear over and over again to troubleshoot issues. But if we know that our game is working out okay, we should add another function to create a new random number seed for every time we open the game. So to do that, we just open rsplash creation code. And right before we go to our title, I like to add the function randomize, which randomizes the random number generating seed for the game. So now when we run the game, every time we run the game, we are going to get different notes in different locations. So we saw it there, and we do it again, it's going to be different. Yep, it's different now. Our game is essentially finished. However, I'm going to teach you how to publish your game now on itch.io, which is a indie game developers website where people can freely publish their games or even publish their games for people to pay and download. It's a great resource for indie game developers to get familiar with. Now, I've designed this game to work well as a web browser game. Not all games that you make in GameMaker will work as web browser games. There are some idiosyncrasies with how web browsers handle what's called HTML5 code, which means if you want to develop a web browser game, you should be testing your game on the web often to catch little bugs that you'll have to adjust for. However, when I was creating this game, that's what I was doing, so I know that everything works. Right now, the game is only running as a Mac or a Windows game, depending on what platform you're currently on. But we are now going to teach you how to publish your game to the web. And to do that, you're going to start by signing into GameMaker. Right now, I'm not signed in, and most likely you aren't either because you haven't needed to be signed in. But now you need to sign in. You're going to click the little profile icon on the top here to sign in. If you don't have a GameMaker account or an Opera account, you need to sign in. You need to register and sign in. I have a legacy account from before Opera, the web browser, bought GameMaker, so I sign in with this little button down here. But you should probably create an account and sign in up here. But let's do what we need to do. You won't see my password, so it doesn't matter if I do it here, but this is my account. I'm going to log in. You have signed in successfully. There we go. So I'm now signed in, and you've noticed that it no longer says test, but it says Windows as my current target build. After you're signed in, it should say Mac or Windows up here. And we are going to, well, first, if you want to publish to Windows, if you're on a Windows machine, then that's great. You have Windows, you can go over here to create executable, and you can create an executable Windows app version of your game. Go ahead and you can play around with that if you'd like. But you can do that on your own. For Mac, it's a bit different to create apps on Mac. It's a whole process. You can Google it if you want to. I recommend you just avoid it. But you can Google it and follow other people's tutorials for how to do it. But it is a bit of a headache. I don't like doing it. I like publishing for Windows or for web browser, personally. So if we're going to publish this game to a web browser, we click our current target build and we change it to HTML5. Now, GameMaker will have to download something. I've already downloaded it. So just click HTML5 and download whatever it needs to download. And then make sure it's selected. So up here, it should say HTML5 as the current target build. And under output, it'll say JavaScript. Now, if you run the game while the current target build is HTML5, what will happen is that you'll click run and then it will open a web browser, your default web browser on your computer. I'm going to drag it in with your game. Now, you'll notice no sound is running, and that's because one of the small quirks of publishing to the web is that you actually have to click in this window for any sound code to run. Don't worry about that because when we publish to itch.io, they already have that workaround already worked in. But if you want to publish to other platforms, make sure you have a splash page with a button that players click on before you have any code that runs any sounds. So right now you won't hear any music because the code that runs our music was run before we clicked into that window. So you can still test your browser game that way, but I actually like to put it on itch.io when I'm testing it, just to see how it's working. So our current target build is HTML5, that's all set. Now to publish to itch.io, first we need to create a build of our game. So with HTML5 set as the target, click Create Executable, which is over here. And then, oh yeah, stop the current project, yeah. So let me hit cancel, I'm gonna hit stop. That's another thing, is that when you're testing with HTML5, you always have to manually click stop over here to stop the target build, even if you've closed out of the browser window. So create executable, you're gonna click package as zip, which puts everything in a zipped folder all in one folder. And I recommend just saving it to your desktop so you know exactly where to find it. When I'm exporting a build of my game, I always add a version number. So here I'm going to write lowercase v, and then I just write the date. So let's say 0617, so it's June 17th right now. And then I also add another number to it. So this is version 0 for today's date. So actually I'm going to remove the v there. So it says Learning GameMaker 0617 and then v0, so version 0 for today. I'm going to click save or hit enter, and then right now it's building it, and it is now built. So if I go to my desktop, you will see I have this little zip folder, and that is the web browser version of my game saved right there. Next, we need to create an itch.io account and log in. So I already have an itch.io account. I'm already logged in. So go to itch.io, that's itch.io. Create a new account, set that up, and after you created your account and go to the landing page, this is what you should see, and you should see your username up here. And you click the drop-down arrow, and you're going to go to dashboard. You'll see that I already have a version of this published, but don't worry about that. But you're going to go to create new project. And this is where you add your game to itch.io. So I'm going to walk through what all of these mean really quick. First thing I like to do is add a title. So for this, you can write melody, melodrama, colon, and then you can write tutorial project by your username. Or you say tutorial practice project. Because this is a game I designed. So please add a colon with something unique that you write afterwards so people know that my original version is mine and then this is your tutorial practice. And then you go, after I add a title, I like to add my images. Now these are images that I've already created, and here it tells you the kind of images you should create. It recommends 630 pixel by 500 pixel image that I've already created. If you click upload cover image, and if you go to those art assets that I've had you already download and you go to publishing, the publishing folder, you'll see that I have a cover image already for you. So double click that and that will load up. Next, you can add screenshots. So I go here to add screenshots. Same thing, screenshot 1, 2, and 3. I just hold shift or control to highlight all of them and click open, and those will open. Next, you can add a description or change the project URL. Right here it says the full title, but you can change it to just Melody Melodrama Tutorial if you like. And then short description. This is what I like to write here. I have it in my notes, sorry. Short description or tagline, final results for the tutorial by Sky Laurel Anderson. Classification, games. It's not software, it's a game, so just leave that the same way. Kind of project, we're going to change it from downloadable to HTML, which means a web browser game. Release status is release. No payments for this because you did not create this game. It is my game, so it would be a breach of copyright if you received payments for this project that I've designed, so please check no payments. Now to uploads, this is where you upload your game. Click upload files, go to your desktop, and that zip folder, open that, and it's going to upload it. And then be sure to check this box that says this file will be played in the browser. Check that. So this file will be played in the browser. You're not asking people to download it because it's a web browser game. They won't be able to play it on their computers. Next is, let's see, embed options, which is right here. You're going to make sure it says embed in page, and then manually set the size to be the size of your game window, which is 896 by 576. Frame options, anything mobile friendly. It's not mobile friendly, so don't check that. Automatically start on page load, don't do that. Full screen button, I recommend you don't. Enable scroll bars, please don't check that. And then just so make sure none of these are checked. Now, details, you can write, this is the game I made by following Sky Laurel Anderson's tutorial, period. You can watch it here. And please link to my tutorial, which I will put here. You can just find the playlist, or you can link to the first video in the series. I actually have a link here that I'm going to move over. Oh, that's no good. Let me try that again. .io. I'm going to click this to get the, there we go. Here's the playlist. Oh, I guess it looks the same either way. But you can link to just the first video in the series, or if you find the playlist URL, you can add it there for me, please. Genre, I'd say educational, because this is like a tutorial. Tags, I'm going to say GameMaker, comma, tutorial, comma, music. Just hit enter, and those are the tags. That helps people when they're searching for different games, they can find your game. No links to app stores. You can change how itch.io refers to your game. The default is just game, but if it's like an app, you can write app here, but it's a game, so just leave it as the default. And then you can enable comments under your game if you have people play it, and then visibility and access. So right now we're just saving it as a draft, and we can click save and view page. So this is what the page will look like. And if you click run game, notice how itch.io has a system, so you click in the game window before the rest of the game loads, and everything is working fine. Now, the game won't be published yet. To do that, you need to do some other things, but before you do that, let's stay on this page, and you'll notice up here you can go back to edit game, which takes us right back to your edit game page. You can always go back to view page, and it takes us back here. But here we can also edit some things. So for instance, you can edit the theme and change the colors. So you'll notice that when I published my version of the game, I've changed all the default colors to like make them match the art design of my game, the fonts, the links, the background. You can do something similar here by playing around with these values. The font you can change, background images, you can have whatever else. Link, more options. Be sure to, under layout where it says screenshots, it says auto, which hides the screenshots. Be sure to just select sidebar so you actually see the screenshots you uploaded on the game page. And now you can go back to, you can click save and then go to edit game. And now you can publish it if you wish. And to publish it, all you have to do is select public and then click save. And then after that, the game is published, and you can share the link right here with friends. You can email it to people. And that's why I like web browser games, is that it's just shareable by link. You can text people this link, you can email them this link, you can post it to social media. It's very easy to share. And that's why I like developing web browser games for these small indie projects. But that is it. That is all you need to know to publish your game on itch.io. And that's the last step. You've made a game. You know the basics of how to use GameMaker. You learned a bunch of different functions. This is not everything you'll need to make your dream game in GameMaker. My advice is don't make your dream game. My advice is to make a bunch of games and keep learning new things. Follow other tutorials. When you don't know how to do something, do some Googling and teach it yourself. There is no replacement for learning how to learn on your own. Good luck. Feel free to email me with individual questions or leave comments on the video if you have individual questions. I may or may not be able to respond, but good luck with making your games.